Well, welcome everybody. Today is February 15th, 2015. We're continuing our study of Esther, and today is Meet Haman. So this is a time for us to go through and talk about the bad guy in the story. The painting that I have up was done by Rembrandt, and this is his interpretation of Haman. He's put some pieces on there that are sort of from the Renaissance era, may or may not have applied directly to the time period of that Haman lived in period. But it's interesting just the way that he shows him and some of the things that he shows about him. So Haman's going to be our bad guy in the story, our antagonist. And we're going to start talking through some of his history today and a little bit of that. So starting off at Esther chapter 3, verse 1. After these things, King Ahasuerus promoted Haman the Agagite, the son of Hammedatha, and advanced him and set his throne above all the officials who are with him. You're probably like, okay, that doesn't mean a whole lot to me, I don't suppose. Well, let me give you, if you were a Jew, particularly a well-read Jew, what that might mean. Okay? So let me jump into a different story just for a moment, and let me read about the idea of him being a Agagite. Okay? So let's go over to 1 Samuel chapter 15 and read about what happened to one of the kings there. Now, I could have gotten a lot of them, but this is the end of the story for Agag, A-G-A-G. And so let's start off at verse 31. So this is the prophet Samuel and King Saul. And Samuel has instructed King Saul to do certain things. And I'll pick up reading at 31. So Samuel turned back after Saul, and Saul bowed before the Lord. Then Samuel said, "Bring here to me Agag, the king of the Amalekites." Now, the Amalekites have waged war against the Israelites and have done huge damage to them, and now finally the Lord has delivered them into the Israelites' hands. And Agag came to him cheerfully. And Agag said, "Surely the bitterness of death is past." And Samuel said, "As your sword has made women childless, so your mother be childless before among women." And Samuel hacked Agag to pieces before the Lord in Gilgal. 1 Samuel 15:31 to 33. Them were bloody times. Okay, this is the prophet of the Lord, by the way. That's that's who did it in retribution for the things that Agag had done against the Lord. And this tale of this has been retold then and set up a long-standing feud. This was centuries before we're now standing here, but a long-standing feud that the Agagites, this is the tribe that come from the remaining sons of Agag, were then had a blood feud against the Jews. Okay, so when you read that, that's a very significant part of history in relation to this. So, this is one of the movie shots from that kind of shows another interpretation of him. This dark hair, dark beard. You kind of get the idea of what the dark, brooding, evil guy, very focused, as we will see, upon power and prestige. Verse 2. And all the king's servants who were at the king's gate bowed down and paid homage to Haman, for the king had so commanded concerning him. But Mordecai did not bow down or pay homage. The king's servants who were at the king's gate said to Mordecai, "Why do you transgress the king's command?" So do me a favor and put your hands over on the keyboard, and I'd like to know, what do you think might be some reasons for Mordecai's refusal to bow down? But Mordecai did not bow down or pay homage. Well, okay, what, I mean, I know you're not Mordecai, and you don't know for sure, but just imagine, if you will, no wrong answers here, what might be some reasons that he did it, okay? Eileen says he doesn't give deference to evil, so he sees Haman as being evil in a variety of ways, and Eileen says that he doesn't give deference or honor, if you will, to evil. I think that's a good point. Okay, what are some other reasons that perhaps Mordecai's refusal to bow down? Okay, he's making a statement of faith, Paul says. Okay, so Paul, if I can put words in your mouth, for you, Mordecai bowing down to him is, in the sense, sort of a, making sure that you don't bow before any except the Lord God. Amy says it's biblical, okay? And so basically it's honor, and basically I think she's saying that you're not going to honor any above God, right? Cherie says it's against the Lord's commandment that you don't bow down to anyone before but God. Okay? Yep, that's what Amy's saying, of course, related to God. Hey, Kim, are you on here? I think Kim's still on here right now. Kim, you're Vietnamese. Do you ever bow to anyone? when you meet them? Well, yes, you do. Are you worshiping them all the time? Kim says, and do you, and bow, right? And of course, I bow to you as well. Coming to your home, I bow to you. Am I worshiping you when I bow to you? No, it's not the same meaning that I'm worshiping you. Exactly. So this is actually a question. Kim's laughing. She's like, yeah, that's am I worshiping you? She's laughing at that. Okay, so there's actually an interesting question. Is Haman putting himself in a position of divinity, saying, worship me and show me worship as if I was a demigod, for example, right, by bowing? Or is it a sign of respect the way that Kim's people do in Vietnam? The short answer is we don't know, okay? Because of the fact the Bible raises Mordecai up here as a good example, we're going to assume that it's at least a matter of arrogance and pride. That was the evil part that Eileen was putting out there, and he's not giving deference to evil. And that maybe there was a part here related to sort of a divinity idea, right? Kim said, Kim left says it's a sign of respect, and of course the people that you bow to is a sign of respect to those people that you bow to. Exactly. So this is kind of interesting. So is Mordecai in the right or the wrong? Well, it depends upon what the bow means, right? And to bow the head and bow the knee and so forth with this. And so let's go with the idea for the moment that there is a divinity aspect to it. And you could get there by saying the following, that the sort of what's called the divine right of kings. And this is a tradition that all people who are ruling are only there because of the fact that deity has placed them there, and therefore by respecting them, you're respecting the deity, if you will, and so you're showing respect to them. And Haman is sort of, if you go on the idea that he is going on that idea that the king, you bow to the king is sort of like a god, I'm under the king's authority, therefore you bow to me because I'm sort of like a demigod, if you will. If we go with that idea, then the concept here would be this is one painting of this where you show Haman is walking past, the others stand up and bow their head before him. And in this example, although this may not be quite like this, Mordecai remains seated, right? And you see Haman rather irritated, of course, in this particular painting, right? And I think it says politically or scripturally, it kind of depends on how you want to take it. Well, let me jump over to this particular question. So I'd like you to answer me this. With what you do know of the situation, and assuming for the purposes of the discussion that there is sort of a religious aspect to it, right? Would you bow? Would you bow? If you were in this, let's put it this way. I'm trying to put it in modern terms. So let's we can either ask the question in old time sake, like you were in that particular land where, no offense, but your rights, you could be thrown in jail for no good reason. There was no modern American system to protect you, if you all follow my point, right? And so, assuming we're asking the question back during these olden days, right? So if you were in his time, in his place, if you were Mordecai, I'll ask it that way. If you were Mordecai, would you bow? So go ahead and put your hands over on the keyboard and answer that one for me. I'd like to kind of hear from most of you, if you don't mind, at least a yes or no. Would you bow? Okay. Kim says no. Those of you that are watching this video afterwards, give them a second while they're answering. Eileen says possibly. I think that's an interesting and honest answer. Those of you that are watching the video, give them a second as we kind of give them a chance to walk through it. I encourage you to answer it for yourself. Well, that's Will and G say probably in fear of being put to death. Paul says it depends. I think that's G said probably, and then Will says not sure. Okay. So, my body might bow, my mind not so much. And Amy says, I want to think that I wouldn't. Right? So various types of answers here. Would you agree it's complicated? This is not easy. I mean, no offense in America. I mean, let's kind of put it in context. President, Obama has put the authority on Vice President Biden that when Vice President Biden comes in, that you will stand out of respect when he comes in, whatever, right? And you come in and Vice President Biden visits your place where you work. Would you refuse to stand, you know what I'm saying, or show some other sign of respect there? It's an interesting piece. And so Eileen brings up, it's actually, Will says, it seems like it might be like saluting a superior soldier. And Paul says, yes, it actually is kind of complicated. And like Eileen's answer, it's kind of interesting. Culturally, Amy says, culturally, we've been programmed all our lives, and probably, I think, to do things a certain way. I think is what she's saying there. All right, so it's kind of interesting. Let's go ahead and go into verse 4. And the story continues. When they spoke to him day after day, and he would not listen to them, that's they're speaking to Mordecai, they told Haman in order to see whether Mordecai's words would stand, for he had told them that he was a Jew. That phrase, for he had told them he was a Jew. Why is that so significant in this particular story? Why is it significant that Mordecai had told them he was a Jew? You have to kind of remember the last week's sermon and think about it a little bit. I'll give you a moment to ponder that as to why it was that Mordecai's words that he was a Jew significant. Pause while I drink a quick cup of coffee. Okay, Eileen says that Jews were less than others. Okay, I'm not quite sure what that one means. Paul says separates himself it separates himself as he had told Esther not to tell that she was a Jew. Do y'all remember that? That he said, whatever you do, don't say that you're a Jew. And now a number of years have gone by, perhaps as many as 5 years between the time that Esther had become queen and up until certainly before the next slide, what's about to happen. And so they were, Eileen says they were less significant. Okay, so it's interesting that Mordecai has gone in this position where he has put out there. Last week we talked about in the sermon, to what extent do you state that you're a Christian? Do you let it be known? Do you have, as I put it in last week's sermon, there's a place for everyone between the one who is rather quiet about their particular faith and all the way out to the person with a bullhorn out in a corner. And I have respect for everyone in that spectrum. I recognize it's there. However, I hope that if directly asked, that you'll answer the question truthfully, and that even if there are consequences for your answer. So, and there's actually a biblical reason why I say that if you're asked, that you need to confess before men what you believe. So that's why I feel that's important. But I recognize not all of us drive around in vehicles emblazoned with "I am a Christian" type bumper stickers necessarily upon them, for example, or other things like that, or necessarily wear T-shirts. And I am myself selective on how and when I share my faith. And I think that there's some value in that. But Mordecai didn't. Mordecai said, I am a Jew. And in this more hostile environment, perhaps he felt more comfortable. Perhaps he felt that I'm an old man. What are they going to do to me? Maybe, you'll follow that. What do I have to lose, right? I'm just an old man. I've now my niece that I've been taking care of like a daughter seems to be well taken care of. She's queen, for crying out loud. So maybe I'm able to risk a little more, if you will. And that does happen, by the way, when people reach a certain point in their life, when they have a certain point of maturity, they're like, I can be a little more free. I feel like I can be, which is, believe it or not, for some folks, a great freeing aspect of, shall we say, the golden years. Well, so this is interesting that he shared this, and as we get into the story, we'll see what the consequences are. So verse 5, and when Haman saw that Mordecai did not bow down or pay homage to him, Haman was filled with fury. But he disdained to lay hands on Mordecai alone. So as they made known to him the people of Mordecai, Haman sought to destroy all the Jews, the people of Mordecai, throughout the whole kingdom of Ahasuerus. Okay? Paul says he may have been led by the Spirit to do so. You're absolutely correct. Let me ask you this question. It's not on the slide, but I'll just ask it off the cuff. Do you think that when he heard the words that he was supposed to bow to Haman, that he spent a long time thinking and probably praying about it? Do you think that some thought went into his action? What do you think? Particularly after it went day after day and people asked him and challenged him and it became a repeated action day after day, that somewhere along the line he put some thought into this and he probably put some prayer into it. Now the Bible doesn't say, but is that a reasonable? Okay, Eileen said, Amy says, nope, knee-jerk. Maybe knee-jerk the first time, but after the second day, the third day, the fourth day, he probably spent some time thinking about it. At some point, it's a conscious decision that I'm not going to do this even if there are some consequences. He has made a point, in my opinion, somewhere, maybe not the first day, maybe it is the first day, but somewhere along the line that, and Paul says, as the situation developed, yeah, no, I'm with you. At some point, he has reached a point where he has decided, I will use the phrase, to make a stand. That I'm going to do this. And that's kind of a key phrase for today's sermon, to take a stand. And so with that, I think as you look through this, I'd like to think in your own life, there are all types of times when you're going to be called to take a stand, where this is something that becomes relevant and you say, I need to act, I need to speak, I need to do something, I need to not do something, I need to whatever. And the idea of taking a stand is a key component then for what Mordecai, I think, is thinking about and doing. Cherie says probably, but not thinking too far about the reactions they might take. He probably only thought about what they might do to him. Yes, I totally agree with that. I don't think in his wildest dreams Mordecai could have imagined what's about to transpire and how much danger he put the entire people of the Jews who are living inside the kingdom, which, by the way, is most of the Jews in the world, at risk by his actions. I almost wonder if he would have had as much courage if he had known that, but whatever. Let's go into chapter 3, verse 7. So in the first month, which is the month of Nisan, in the 12th year of King Ahasuerus, and by here we're definitely 5 years later from where she became queen rather, they cast P-U-R, they cast that is, they cast lots before Haman day after day, and they cast it month after month, till the 12th month, which is the month of Adar. So the interpretation here is when they say day after day, it wasn't like one day they showed up and said, let's cast the lot one time, and then we'll come back tomorrow and cast it again. They're trying to pick a day, and so they're trying this date, this date, this date, and they're casting. By drawing lots, they're probably pulling out pieces of pottery out of a bag, or else they're taking and throwing things that look kind of like an early version of our dice and throwing them on the ground. Those are both interpretations of this. Before Haman day after day, and they cast it month after month. So they're trying to, no, not that day, not that day, that day. Okay, that day. It will be that day and it will be that day, and it will be that month, and so they can tell the 12th month, which is the month of Adar. So they cast Pur, P-U-R. Has anybody ever heard of Purim? P-U-R-I-M, Purim? Purim. So this is a Jewish holiday. And as it turns out, and so Amy says, yep, she's heard of that one. Okay. Yep. So Paul, I was looking for examples of Purim out there. Amy, Cherie says, I see it on the calendar and know that it's based on Esther. And Cherie says, I know I've seen it on there. Yes, it's actually, I think it's, well, look. So Paul, I was looking at examples for 2015 for Purim, and I found a flyer from one of the synagogues in Wyoming. So if the Wyoming Jews are getting together, this is a real flyer for March 4 and 5. It starts on March 4th at sundown. This is the festival of Purim. And so they have a number of different things that they're doing. Paul, I don't know if you knew that there was apparently a strong Jewish presence in Wyoming, but there you go. So, and you can see some things that are on here, which are sort of interesting. They have these little what's called Megillah readings, and that's the bottom left-hand corner. And you can see a picture of one of those that's up a little higher. You can see this yellow and red little thing. It's got a handle on it. I'll talk about that in a second. And then they have the various little pieces. And they're made out of like a cookie, little triangle cookies there. You can see those. Or in this case, which I find fascinating, I did not know this until I did some research. It's also common now, instead of making the cookies, they make them a little more filling by using sushi. So yes, it does say at the bottom down there, Purim sushi bash, and that's great. It's interesting. It's kosher, and that's a great thing. But it's very, very interesting. So what happens is, and to show you this next picture, is the children, particularly the young folks, and perhaps helped by the adults, receive the noisemakers, the rattle you see in this picture with the red and the blue, and you take the handle and you spin it, and it makes a clacking noise. And so as the book of Esther is read on Purim as part of this festival, because the date is the date that the Jews should have been all killed. Sorry, spoiler alert, they don't get killed, but in fact they are delivered. And so it's celebrated today as a festival. for God delivering his people and working through that. And as the book of Esther is read, all the children in the audience are given noisemakers. And when you reach the point in the story where you reach the name Haman, they all grab their noisemakers and make it as much as they can and make as much noise to drown out the name of Haman. Okay? I just thought that was interesting. Okay? And then the little cookies over on the right-hand side of the plate that look like triangles, those are representing the pure. The little lots that they would, this is their interpretation of what they might look like, made out of course, cookies. These are dipped in chocolate. And there you go. All right. So, yes, Eileen says to give gifts and food baskets, dress up, share festival meal temple, right? And Haman's hat. Okay, I hadn't heard that one. I've also heard that they're Eileen, I haven't heard it told that way. So maybe I'm off on that one. But anyway, it's interesting. So, at any rate, anyway, interesting piece. Back to the story. Verse 8, then Haman said to King Ahasuerus, there's a certain people scattered abroad and dispersed among the peoples in all the provinces of your kingdom. Their laws are different from those of every other people, and they do not keep the king's laws, so it's not to the king's profit to tolerate them. So if it please the king, let it be decreed that they be destroyed, and I will pay 10,000 talents of silver into the hands of those who have charge of the king's treasure of the king's business. Okay, let me pause. 10,000 talents of silver is approximately 12 million minted ounces, 12 million ounces of silver. This is an incredible amount of money. Okay, and so this is huge cash, and this is the king's money, which Haman, this is really interesting. What he's going to do is he's going to transfer it from one part of the government to another so that it becomes available for him so that he can use it to pay the assassins who will go through and kill all of the Jewish people. Okay, this is to help give him incentive to make his plan work across the 127 provinces. You're going to spend a lot of cash in a lot of places to be able to kill a bunch of people. Well, so this is so I will pay 10,000, the king would say, that the king would pay 10,000 talents of silver into the hands of those who have charge of the king's business, that they may put it into the king's treasuries. Then the king took his signet ring from his hand, gave it to Haman the Gagite, the son of Hammedatha, the enemy of the Jews. And the king said to Haman, the money is given to you, the people also, to do with them as it seems good to you. Then the king's scribes were summoned on the 13th day of the first month, and an edict, according to all that Haman commanded, was written to the king's satraps and to the governors over all the provinces, and to all the officials of the people, to every province in his own script, and every people in his own language. It was written in the king Ahasuerus and sealed with the king's signet ring. So the edict was written on the 13th day of the first month. This is one of the pieces that was placed out there that this was going to happen. And so if you look at traditions for things being, for superstitions, do you all have superstitions about things? Maybe black cats crossing your path, not walking under a ladder, various types of things. Kim, I'm writing my paper right now on Vietnam, so is there something about taking photos of so many people? Like you don't want to do so many people or whatever, as an example, or maybe other things like that, various types of things. These would be superstitions. Okay, Will's Aaron Rodgers jersey. Apparently that's probably a sports-related thing, I would imagine, right? And go with that. So various types of things. Yep, okay, yep. Okay, I think one of the football teams was touching somebody's beard, if I'm not mistaken. That was one of the things recently. So these are different types of superstitions related to sports and different ideas like that. So the idea of the number 13 being unlucky has a number of possible origins. This Esther chapter 3, verse 12, is one of the reasons that some people think it may have been regarded unlucky. May or may not have been the real origin, but this was one of the ideas that related to it. And I think it's got a decent shot of being true. We can't say for sure, but it certainly is an idea. So that this happened on the 13th day of the first month, that the edict was written that the Jews would be destroyed. So this was written in the name of King Ahasuerus and sealed with the king's signet ring. Verse 13, letters were sent by couriers to all the king's provinces with instruction to destroy, to kill, and to annihilate all Jews, young and old, women and children, in one day, the 13th day of the 12th month, which is the month of Adar, and to plunder their goods. There's a lot of discussion about whether or not in Hitler's Holocaust, to what extent that he looked back to what was attempted back during Esther. And I don't know that it's conclusive in which direction, but there are certainly some similarities, that I will say here, between what was attempted in killing the Jews and taking their money from here and what actually was done during the Holocaust. And so I'll just add that as a sort of a historical footnote here, that this is something that may have been an inspiration for Hitler and sort of some of his attempted pieces there, obviously blending in with his view of Aryanism and a supreme race and other things as well. So interesting. Okay. Will just yeah, you're saying the same thing that reminded you? Yeah. I haven't found a source that proves that conclusively, that Hitler himself or his folks were familiar with this, but it wouldn't surprise me based upon what I know of his upbringing. So, verse 14, a copy of the document was to be issued as a decree in every province by the proclamation to all the peoples to be ready for that day. The couriers went out hurriedly by order of the king, and the decree was issued in Susa, in the citadel. And the king and Haman sat down to drink, but the city of Susa was thrown into confusion. Let's do a couple takeaways. Number one, you need to know where you stand before you take a stand. So this is with Mordecai, and I think Mordecai did know where he stood. At least I think he was, well-founded. We don't know that for sure, but I'm going to argue that he was well-founded in his faith, and certainly his courage, we would hope, came from God and his trust in God. He expresses that some during the next chapter, and I think that will be a recurring theme that we're going to see, and certainly he instilled some of this, I think, in Esther. And so I would offer it for you that there are going to be times where you're going to need to take a stand. Where is that practical? Well, to be honest, what I was thinking about when I wrote it was we have encounters at times with folks where we need to talk about our particular faith. If I had a nickel for every Jehovah's Witness and Mormon missionary who's knocked on my door, and I engaged them in what I hope was a deep conversation about their faith, I had to think about this, that this is something that I need to know where I stand, and I encourage you to know where you stand, what your beliefs are, before you go into a deep conversation with them. Now, I'm not trying to wave you off from a conversation, but I am waving you off where you recognize that you may need to pull your pastor in if it gets over your head, and that's perfectly fine, okay? But this is one of those things where I think it's important to think out your beliefs before you try to act on them from that perspective, just as a concept. So you can't do it perfectly, but in terms of Haman, certainly when Haman went day after day after day after day, making the same particular action of not doing this, I feel it's likely, I can't prove it, but I feel it's likely that somewhere in one of those evenings, he sat down and had a chat with God. At least I would hope so. He certainly spent some time thinking about it. I think I can say that's probably pretty likely. As Amy was saying, maybe the first one was there, and go from there. But Mordecai, not Haman. All right, so I'm sorry, I botched that one pretty badly. But yes, Mordecai. That Mordecai certainly, as it went day after day, that Mordecai was strong in his belief. Sorry about that. Botched that one. Okay, number two. When you take a stand for God, someone will usually oppose you. It's pretty rare that you're going to feel called to take a stand, and there is no opposition. Now, I would put a footnote on here. Sometimes the someone is you. Sometimes it's just you and God, and you go to take a stand, and there's a part of you that fights against you taking a stand. You know what I'm talking about, folks? That this is sometimes the hardest battle. This is why I started with the song "Courageous." Casting Crowns talking about that in the battle of the mind, I will take my stand, and I really agree with that. In fact, the other verse that really applies to that I thought was very appropriate, and Sherry and Sarah and I were talking about it earlier on, was we'll only stand. The only way we'll ever stand is on our knees. And I would agree with that. And Sarah and I were talking about that. It's only in prayer before God when we have the strength to be able to stand up and be able to do what it is that's important. So number two here, when you take a stand, someone will usually oppose you. It's the essence of taking a stand is that you have opposition. And so maybe it's an obvious statement, but it sometimes comes in ways that surprises you. And it certainly will surprise Mordecai. in this particular, that the opposition will be so much more than he ever imagined would come from his simply not bowing to Haman. I mean, he could not in his wildest dreams, I don't think, have imagined the consequences that would come from there, but it's just the way it is. And, it's interesting because we get to the next chapter, you're going to see his faith that salvation will come to the Jews. God will save them. And we'll see how this will happen. So, number 2, when you take a stand for God, someone will usually oppose you. And number 3, taking a stand can involve more than just you. And this is what happens with Mordecai. Taking a stand can involve more than just you. It can get messy. In fact, it usually does. So when you go to take a stand, I mean, not to be, kind of simplistic, but in a way, it's almost easier to take a stand on people you've never met before who are complete strangers. Oh, sure, it's going to be upsetting, whatever the case might be, but you're going to walk away and presumably, at least you think, are less likely to ever run into them again. Y'all know what I'm talking about? It's just a chance encounter, and you're walking through your life, and you probably won't run into it again. Although I have had several of those chance encounters that later I come right back to the same person again, and in fact find that it was very, very significant in ways I never could have imagined. But the real challenge is when take a stand are people that you love. When you have people that are very close to you, and you feel compelled to take a stand on something, being able to stand firm in what you believe, but to do so in a way that's polite and be able to convey it without being, you're speaking to the idea that you're against, but not the people. That you're not trying to say, it's about them, but it's about the individual, about the potential action, for example, or whatever it would be. This is important. It gets messy. People may not understand why it is that you feel so strongly about something. So perhaps it's important to follow up afterwards and perhaps talk with them to make sure that you resolve anything that may be lingering. But taking a stand can involve more than just you, and it can get messy. So I think this is important for you to talk through. If it's something that you feel strongly about, to be honest, it may not come out completely clean. The way you say things or the way you do things may not be, particularly perfectly rehearsed. And so you may have, shall we say, some cleanup to do after the fact. But nevertheless, do the best you can, and I think God will honor that. And obviously, stick to your convictions, but do so in a loving manner. So I would refer back to what I refer to often, which is speaking the truth in love. And I think that if we stick to that, then I think that's a good pattern for us all to follow, and I think it will be effective. So that gets us to then question for the week: where does God want me to take a stand this week? Where does God want me to take a stand this week? There may be something going on in your life, something that God is trying to work, and maybe more than just you. You may think it's just about you, but as you can tell by this story, there may be much larger implications. And the mere act of you taking a stand may inspire someone else to take a stand on a much more important topic than you would ever know about or even possibly imagine. So, where does God want me to take a stand this week? I'd ask you to pray about that, and I think God will honor you asking him that question. Let's go to the Lord in prayer. Lord, Heavenly Father, I thank you for the courage that you give us to take a stand. I ask that you help us as we are working through these things to speak your truth in love and to do so in a manner that shines your light in a dark place. Lord God, thank you for all that you're doing in our lives, and just ask you continue to bless us and watch over us and bring us closer to you one step at a time. In Jesus Christ's name I pray. Amen.